Do you know the first rule they drill into you about wilderness survival? Never panic. But that's easier said than done. No matter how seasoned you think you are, no matter the toughness you claim, the moment you realize you are completely alone, with no clear path home, panic doesn't just creep in, it floods you. The true test lies not in avoiding this terror, but in mastering the art of regaining your composure once fear has taken hold. I was 11 years old then, on a week-long trip to Havasupai with my church group sometime in August. I never really believed in anything they talked about on Sundays, but I was from a poor family and they always paid for my trips. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. In fact, I wouldn't have had much of a childhood at all if not for them. If you've never been to Havasupai, imagine this. After trekking a grueling half-marathon through the sun-blasted, arid expanses of the Grand Canyon, you stumble upon an untouched paradise of rivers and waterfalls, a verdant oasis that defies the desolate landscape around it. Look it up. Pictures don't do it justice, but they come close. But I digress. The hike there is a downward trek of 10 miles. Naturally, the return is its uphill counterpart. Picture this, a slightly pudgy 11-year-old me trudging 10 miles uphill in 90-degree heat. It was manageable, though, as long as we stayed in our groups. We were a few dozen strong, so those of us who were slower started in front. Fatigue set in quickly, and I fell back to the next group. Another 20 minutes, and I dropped back again, each step a growing struggle. The trail was a ribbon between towering stone walls carved by creeks over millennia, with other stretches laid bare beneath the unforgiving sun. The foliage cleared away. I can't pinpoint exactly how it happened. I was staring at my feet, the soft thud of my water bottle against my thigh marking each step, my mind adrift in a sea of fatigue and heat. When I looked up, I found myself in a clearing. The path I had been following vanished, replaced by the random scatter of sagebrush under the harsh sun. I backtracked, hoping to find the trail, but it was as if it had evaporated. Panic set in, tears streaming down my face as I broke into a desperate sprint. After a minute, the trail was still nowhere in sight. I turned, running, screaming for help, but my voice was swallowed by the vastness of the canyon. My heart was a drumbeat against my chest, my mouth dry as I looked at the quarter-liter of water in my bottle, just a few sips left. I was going to die. That was the only thought in my mind. I ran in another direction, my voice hoarse as I screamed again, "Help! Help!" I pushed on for minutes that felt like hours, but there was nothing. Only the relentless, hot, desolate landscape stretching out endlessly around me. The sun bore down, turning the canyon into a furnace, the heat mirroring the mounting hysteria in my mind. I looked around the vast canyon, what looked like miles in any direction, for any sign of life, any dots of trekkers on the rim, anything. But there was nothing. It was around 2 p.m., and the sun wasn't going down anytime soon. In my desperation, I cried out for God to please save me, but still, silence. To be honest, "I'm going to die" wasn't a coherent thought in my head. It was more primal than that, a visceral sensation that grips you. Those who have felt it know what I mean. It's not about thinking in words, it's about experiencing a raw, unfiltered surge of dread. Panic is the essence of fear, a state where planning and logic are drowned out by an overwhelming wave of despair. I collapsed onto the scorched earth, feeling the sting of the hot sand against my hands and knees. My tears fell, disappearing almost instantly as they met the ground, a poignant symbol of my fleeting life being swallowed by the unforgiving soul of the desert. As I sat there, a small but vibrant splash of color caught my eye, a red bird flitting from one parched tree to another. It was the first sign of life I had seen in what felt like an eternity. The sight of it sparked a flicker of hope in my heart. Perhaps, I thought, this bird knows where to find water. Driven by a mix of desperation and instinct, I followed the bird. It seemed almost aware of my presence, waiting for me from branch to branch. My pace quickened, my eyes locked on this beacon of red against the bleached sky. The bird led me through a less trodden path, dotted with the occasional greenery that managed to survive in this harsh environment. And then, ahead, I saw something, or rather, someone. There was a Native American man sitting on a fallen log, the red bird perched calmly on his shoulder. He looked up as I approached, his eyes meeting mine with a depth of understanding that was almost unsettling. "Are you lost?" he asked, his voice gentle, echoing strangely in the vast silence of the canyon. I could only nod, wiping away the tears and dust that clung to my face, trying to steady my breath. "Then rejoice, for you have been found," he said, his tone warm. I stood there, the awkwardness clinging to me like the heat. "Can you help me find the trail?" I managed to ask, my voice hoarse from screaming. "But you're already on a trail," he replied with a gentle smile. "But it's not my trail," I protested. "It's a trail, and it's the one you're on," he countered. I was confused. The raw fear that clouded my mind had begun to subside, and I felt clear thoughts slowly coming back to me. "I need to find my group," I insisted. "The group that left you to die in this heat?" he snapped back, his tone suddenly sharp. "Seems like they're the ones that need to find you." His words stung as I realized the truth in his statement. I swallowed hard, trying to gather my thoughts. The man's eyes lingered on me for a moment, then he nodded slowly. "I can help you find your way home, but you must listen carefully. Follow the echo of my voice and you will be safe." I knew it was strange, but it was my only option, so I simply nodded. He stood up from the log, the red bird fluttering to a nearby branch, watching intently. He cupped his hands around his mouth and called out, his voice ringing through the air, "This way!" The echo reverberated through the canyon walls, fading into the distance. I listened intently, and after a moment I heard the echo return, faint but unmistakable. "This way." I turned back to thank the man, but he had vanished. Only the red bird remained, hopping between branches, tilting its head as if to beckon me forward. I took a deep breath and began to follow the bird. It led me through the rocky terrain, flitting from branch to branch, pausing occasionally to ensure I was still behind. I listened for the echo of the voice, and every now and then it would come again, faint but clear. "This way." I walked for what felt like hours, through rocky terrain and across sun-scorched patches of desert. The red bird was my only guide, hopping ahead, then pausing to make sure I was still following. The familiar echo sounded intermittently, "This way," drawing me forward. The canyon twisted and wound around itself, and I felt disoriented, but the bird remained steady. I scrambled over loose stones, ducked beneath overhanging branches, and navigated through narrow passageways as the sun bore down relentlessly. At one point, the bird perched atop a barren tree, and I heard the echo again. "This way," faint but clear. I followed, feeling the sting of sand against my cheeks as the wind picked up. My throat was parched and my legs ached, but I pushed on. The bird led me to a small clearing surrounded by towering canyon walls. For a moment, I thought I was still lost, but then I heard the distant voices of my group. "Brandon! Brandon!" The group turned as one and ran toward me, relief washing over their faces. They hugged me, patting my back, and bombarded me with questions. "Where were you?" "We were so worried." "Thank God you're safe." Warmth spread through my chest as I looked around at their familiar faces. I was overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. They handed me water and snacks, and I quickly gulped them down. The leaders fussed over me, checking for signs of heat exhaustion. "You're going to be okay," one of them said reassuringly. I smiled and nodded, feeling a sense of safety for the first time in hours. I sat down on a rock, letting the cool breeze wash over me as the group gathered around, chatting and laughing. But just as I was about to speak, I heard a whisper on the wind. "This way." I swallowed hard, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I have to go," I stammered, backing away. The leader's voice deepened, a guttural growl. "You're not going anywhere." In that moment, I heard the whisper again, urgent and clear. "This way." I spun around and bolted, shoving past the clawing hands and running toward the ridge. I could hear them behind me, their voices rising in a cacophony of shrieks and howls. I glanced back once and saw the group standing in a line at the edge of the clearing, their faces twisted in anger, their eyes burning with a malevolent glow. They watched me with predatory intent, their laughter echoing through the canyon. I ran faster, my breath coming in ragged gasps, until I heard the voice again, closer this time. "This way." The red bird fluttered ahead, guiding me through the twisting paths of the canyon. I followed, barely daring to look back, until I stumbled upon a familiar part of the trail. I recognized the marker stones and the way the path curved around a large boulder. Ahead, I saw another group of people, and my heart leaped with relief when I recognized the faces of my real friends. They looked up as I approached, their expressions a mix of shock and joy. "Brandon, there you are!" one of the leaders cried, rushing to me and wrapping me in a tight hug. "We were so worried." I got lost," I managed to say, tears welling up in my eyes as I looked around at the familiar faces. "But I'm okay now." The group gathered around me, offering water and snacks and fussing over me with genuine concern. As I sat down to rest, I noticed the red bird perched on a nearby tree branch, watching silently. I smiled and gave a small nod of gratitude. The bird chirped softly and flew away, disappearing into the bright blue sky. I listened carefully for the voice, but all I heard was the laughter and chatter of my friends. The canyon was still, and for the first time since I had gotten lost, I felt truly safe. It's been 20 years since that day in Havasupai, and honestly, I'd almost forgotten about it. Life moved on, and the memories of that canyon faded into the hazy backdrop of childhood. But every now and then, something happens that brings it all rushing back. Last week, I got a message from Mark, one of my old friends from the church group. He suggested we catch up over a few drinks at a local bar. I hadn't spoken to him in ages, but I figured it would be nice to reconnect. The bar was dimly lit and Mark was already sitting at a table in the corner when I arrived. He hadn't changed much, still the same lanky frame, still laughing too loudly at his own jokes. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a grin. "Brandon, long time no see, my friend. How have you been?" "Not bad," I replied, smiling. "How about you?" We exchanged small talk for a while, reminiscing about old times and filling in the gaps of the years that had passed. He seemed warm and genuine, but there was something off about his eyes, something intense and unsettling. After a few drinks, Mark leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Hey, remember that camping trip to Havasupai?" "Yeah, of course. Hard to forget that one." A smile flickered across his lips. "Yeah, we were all so worried when you were gone, but you weren't really lost, were you?" "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling a chill creep up my spine. He chuckled softly and leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving mine. "Sometimes the ones who get lost don't really get to come back." I nervously shifted in my seat and took a sip of my drink before changing topics. A few minutes later, he suggested that we check out his new car. He seemed quite proud of it, so I obliged. We put on our jackets and headed out into the cold night. The wind bit at my face as we turned down an unlit alley toward the parking lot. Mark walked ahead of me, humming softly, his breath visible in the frigid air. As we approached the lot, I glanced up and noticed a red bird perched on top of a stoplight, its bright plumage stark against the darkness. It cocked its head to the side and chirped softly. Then I heard it, faint but unmistakable, carried on the wind. "This way,"